Good morning everybody and welcome back to another market analysis for the month of February. We're going to be talking about equipment rebalancing again because honestly over the last 2 or 3 weeks the RuneScape economy has been more volatile than the real life economy, and that's pretty impressive considering we had GameStop, AMZ, all that stuff going on. Now exactly 2 weeks ago is when I made my last update on the economy, and since then we've had nearly half a dozen new updates regarding the equipment rebalancing that is going to be coming fairly soon. Tweaks, changes, more nerfs, more buffs, and the economy is just all over the place. Pretty interesting to look at, but kind of crazy for those who actually have the item. As always, if you do enjoy the video, don't forget to leave it a like. I really do appreciate it. Anyway, let's get started. Alright, so to start off here, we're going to be having a look at ranged weapons once again because they are one of the heavy focuses of the equipment rebalance. And now over the last 2 weeks, we have kind of an elaborate timeline, starting with the original rebalance update blog on January 21st. We had another blog on the 22nd, a further blog with more changes on the 26th of January, a rebalancing beta that went live on the 27th, and finally another blog that has gone live on the 3rd and potentially another one looming in the near future. So players and the market have received a lot of new information this week, and that has affected the prices drastically. Now on January 21st, most range equipment started going up in price very quickly, and the Dragon Hunter crossbow was no exception, raising up from 90 mil all the way up to 120 mil, which is a massive increase in just a week. However, something on the 26th totally killed that momentum and nearly crashed it right back down to the original price. So what exactly happened on the 26th? Well, there was another rebalancing blog update, and in it they did a couple of tweaks to the blowpipe, slightly buffing some of the darts, but nothing too major. However, the reality here is a lot of this price increase is due to hype. People didn't really know how strong or weak the blowpipe would be in actuality when it came to the game. Nobody could predict accurately what the meta would actually be, so this price increase maybe was slightly unwarranted. And any nerf, honestly, even a minor one, was enough to completely change the momentum of the item. Pretty much after that, crashing immediately right back down to around 95 mil, which is only slightly higher than it was before the update. And what's really interesting is this price trend is seen across a bunch of different items. We have the Twisted Bow, which saw a big blip in price around that time, going from 1,140 mil up to 1,180 mil, and then pretty much crashing immediately back down after. With that said, the Twisted Bow definitely seems to be on an upward trajectory anyway. A very similar story for the Armadillo crossbow, kind of crazy actually. The Armadillo crossbow went from 30 mil up to 40 mil in just a couple of days. But again, after the 26th, it immediately crashed down to what it was at before, if not actually a bit lower. So it is pretty clear that most players do not think that the Armadillo crossbow is going to be more useful than the blowpipe in any situation, or the majority of situations anyway. A pretty similar story with the Dragon crossbow, that one nearly doubling in price, but pretty much after the 26th, it started crashing right back down again, pretty much back to where it was before. Now when Jagex releases really important information like that, it can have a big effect on some pretty powerhouse items like the Twisted Bow, the Dragon Hunter crossbow, and to find that often causes more of a chain reaction within the entire economy. For example, here we have the Dragon Warhammer. The Dragon Warhammer is following pretty much the exact same trend. It went from 38 mil all the way up to 50 mil within the week, but on January 26th, even though there are no changes to the Dragon Warhammer on that day, it still crashes right back down again. Sure, the overall pricing trend does appear to be going upwards, but that spike and immediate crash is more of an indicator that the entire market was doing something like that, or at the very least it was being dragged along by other items. Another good example of this is the Dragon Hunter Lance. The Lance actually received nearly no changes or updates within any of the blogs, yet it followed pretty much the exact trend, going from 70 mil up to 80 mil and then crashing immediately right back down. And there are dozens of popular PVM items that followed this exact same trend. Okay, so now looking at some items that were more directly affected in a bunch of different blog updates this week, one of the biggest ones being the dhin's Bulwark. The Bulwark did not recover and is just continuing to lose value, mainly because the perceived strength of the Bulwark has continued to go down, even with the minor stat changes and tweaks that Jagex has added on and removed from the Bulwark this week. The price trend hasn't changed all that much, going from around 5 mil at the beginning of the month down to around 3.7 mil now. Now, considering that most people seem to think that the Bulwark is going to be pretty much absolutely useless after the equipment rebalancing, the price actually hasn't crashed all that much yet, although it may very well continue down to almost worthless in the next year or so. In my opinion though, the reality is that the Bulwark just wasn't that useful before. It did of course have some niche uses for doing activities in the wilderness and trying to be safe, but overall the Bulwark just was never going to be worth that much. And of course on cheaper items, the price swings sometimes are not nearly as pronounced. Now one of the items that have seen the most price changes this week is actually the Basilisk Jaw. The Jaw is one of the few items to get its changes totally reverted, or at least mostly. Now looking back at the last year, the Jaw has hovered around 20 mil for pretty much the entire year. Now after the original equipment rebalancing blog, the Jaw dropped by 6 mil. I'm sure there's a pun in there somewhere. Now it held that price for a few days, but just a couple days later, Jagex decided that they were not going to go ahead with that change, which means the price pretty much immediately jumped back up. With that said, they are still going to be removing the special attack from the Basilisk, which means in the end the net change is that, well, Basilisks are going to be a little bit easier to kill most likely, so the Jaw is probably going to continue to trend downwards. Now one item that has been a little bit uncertain this month is Blessed D'hide. People didn't really know whether Blessed D'hide was getting nerfed, whether the stats were going to be the same, how it would fall into the greater picture. Now originally Jagex was intending to nerf the Blessed D'hide pretty much at the same rate that Black D'hide was getting nerfed, but just as of a couple days ago they changed their mind, which means Blessed D'hide is now going to fill a new gap within the ranged armor meta. Somewhere between Black D'hide and Armadillo, arguably somewhere around where Carol's is sitting right now, which means the value of this item has doubled this month, and honestly I could expect it to go up more. Blessed D'hide is not something that you can easily farm out. It's cheap right now because people complete thousands of clue scrolls every day, and it was only marginally better than Black D'hide, but with Black D'hide getting nerfed, it now is filling up a much larger piece of the meta. So I definitely expect Blessed D'hide to go up more, but I'm very curious to see where it ends up. I mean, now if we look at Carol's has gone up a lot this month, from 2.5 mil up to 4 mil, so it's probably going to double in price pretty soon. Now will it get as expensive as Carol's? Maybe not, but now the actual value of these ranged armors have definitely gone up a lot due to the Black D'hide nerf. Alright, so now jumping over to the opposite side of the spectrum here, we have a lot of items that have crashed recently and have actually had complete opposite reactions compared to stuff like the Twisted Bow and the Dragon Enter crossbow. Okay, so first up here, let's look at the Scythe. So after the equipment rebalancing blog was dropped, the Scythe started to lose value very quickly, going from around 670 mil all the way down to 600 mil in just a week. But then of course after the update blog was released, it jumped right back up again. As we can see that the Scythe had pretty much the opposite reaction compared to the Twisted Bow, which had a spike at that time and then returned back to normal. Same with the Dragon Enter Lance and those other items we already looked at. Now similar to the Scythe, we have stuff like the Harmonized Orb, which dropped a ton leading up to the 26 once again. It went from 1.1 bill down to 850 mil just in a week. That's probably one of the biggest decreases of all of them. Sure, it jumped back up a bit, but now is continuing its trend downwards. Looking back further, we can see that this trend had already kind of started. Yes, there's a bit of a hole here from the equipment rebalancing, but overall that's the direction it was headed anyway. A pretty similar story with the Inquisitor's armor set, which lost a ton of value at the exact same time period again, going from 600 mil down to 500 mil, bumping back up to around 600 mil again, and then continuing its trend. The Inquisitor's mace, again, the same thing, going from 700 mil down to 540 mil, jumping back up to 670 mil or something, continuing its trend. And finally, the Volatile Orb, true to its name, did the exact same thing. Now what's interesting is none of these items were realistically directly affected by the equipment rebalancing. None of them actually received nerfs. Some of the tiers were rebalanced, but overall nothing fundamentally changed about the weapons. Yet they were all heavily affected by the news. Now personally what I think happened is a lot of players saw the equipment rebalancing come out and kind of started to freak out a little bit. Sure, these items didn't directly get nerfed, but they started to fall in price anyway. And I think a lot of players that own these could have easily just sold them off because they were worried about them dropping more, and that just had a snowball effect that caused a pretty major but temporary crash. One thing we definitely want to keep in mind is for items like especially the Nightmare drops, they were already falling in value very quickly before the equipment rebalancing. Due to the Nightmare being heavily farmed by gold farmers or maybe even bots, the price was already falling. And then all of a sudden you add in more volatility from the equipment rebalance, and that just kind of exacerbates the problems. Things are just kind of all over the place. Now in general, markets don't really like uncertainty, and that is what we have a lot of right now, uncertain of what nerfs are coming through and how they will affect the game. Markets tend to drop when things are uncertain. If you look historically at when US elections have happened, markets tend to trend downwards during those times because the future of economic policy, social policy, who's going to be in power is uncertain, and the market drops accordingly. So to kind of conclude here, I don't actually think the equipment rebalancing is going to majorly affect these items, but yes, I do think they're going to continue to fall in value due to other more fundamental problems, not so much related to the equipment rebalance. So yeah, there's just a ton going on in the RuneScape market this month. And finally, as per usual, I'm gonna have a look at the Oldschool Runescape bond, and this one actually kind of surprises me a bit. The bonds has actually started to go back up in price again in February. There normally is a seasonal trend for this, and in my experience, the bond usually doesn't start going back up this quickly. Usually it stays pretty low until, I don't know, halfway through the year. But yeah, we're already back up to 5.5 mil for bonds, so that is not a good sign of, well, things to come. Who knows, we might see 8 or 9 mil bonds by the end of this year. It would not surprise me too much. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for today's market analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, if you have any questions or want to discuss something, leave a comment down below. I always read them all, and I'll try to answer some of them as well. Now, before I go here, I want to give a massive thank you to all of my members over on YouTube. A huge thank you to Ocilot, Kush Patel, BradSings, Brian Robinson, Zach Staba, and Capi, who all subscribed at the Dragon tier. You guys are awesome. Thank you again. Joining Basstich, BirdBot, Grumpy Chef, Timothy Chen at the Runite tier, and of course all of you guys. I really appreciate you. If any of you guys are looking for another way to support the channel, becoming a YouTube member is an awesome way to do it. You'll get access to my video release schedule, get a custom role in my Discord, as well as be immortalized in all of my future videos. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.